welcome back to a new episode of Dentistas Mundos. Today we're going to be talking about the Inbde. So this exam is very intimidating for whoever is trying to take it. I know because I've been through it and it can be super challenging. Today we're going to do a remake of an old YouTube video that I did many years ago. Like, not many, but like 2 years ago, where I was planning on being a YouTuber, but then I couldn't really edit anything. So it was super challenging and overwhelming. So I ended up not doing the rest of the parts of that video. But right now I want to do a remake of the first part so we can have updated information with the 2025 candidates guide for the Inbde. If you're new here, I'm Dr. B, and I'm a foreign trained dentist who got licensed in the US a couple of years ago. What we're going to do today is we're going to discuss the Inbde, what this exam is. We're going to do an overview. We're going to talk about the type of questions that they're going to ask and everything that you need to know if you're planning on taking the exam. Welcome. Make sure you follow me. Make sure you like our content and share it with everybody that you know so we can reach a broader audience, especially if you have friends that are taking the exam and want to know a little bit more insights on how the exam is and what to know beforehand. We're also going to touch base on study resources in the future. So if you want to have an input on what's going on this next episodes that are coming up, make sure you join my broadcast channel on my Instagram account at Dr. B Dentist. That way you can have an input on what's going into this next episodes. Welcome back. Let's dive into it. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to a new episode of Dentistas Mundos, the podcast that will take you on a global journey through the fascinating world of dentistry. If you're a dentist looking to get licensed in the United States, this is the right podcast for you. I'm Dr. Bianca Charez Ursua, also known as Dr. B Dentist, your host, and I'm happy to have you on board for this amazing adventure. Let's start with what is the Inbde. So maybe if you're preparing to try to get licensed in the US or planning on getting into any universities, residency programs, or advanced standing programs, you've learned or heard about the Inbde, this scary test, right, that everybody has to take in order to apply to whether it's dental school for internationals, which is an advanced standing program, or residency through a DIA pass, or any type of postgraduate program, pretty much. So the Inbde is the Integrated National Dental Board Examination, and it's a broad exam that is about everything dentistry related. This is a mandatory exam in order to get licensed in the US. So everybody who's licensed here has taken the exam. So if you never heard about this, maybe you heard about the National Board of Dental Examiners, which was the previous option of the Inbde, which used to be part 1 and part 2. I actually took those back in the day. We're not going to say how long ago. But it used to be separate in 2 parts. And now they integrated everything and they have the Integrated National Board of Dental Examinations. So we're going to talk about what's this exam all about and what's its purpose, right? If you've never heard about this exam before, maybe you're just getting started in your journey to try to get licensed in the US. This video and this podcast episode is going to be very useful for you because I'm going to kind of like explain everything that entails the whole exam. So let's start with what is the purpose of this exam, because not every country has a national board that they take. So in some other countries, they don't take any sort of exam to become licensed. Some other countries, you just have your degree. For example, in Chile, you have your degree, you finish dental school, and then you just sign up on a website that kind of like proves that you are an actual dentist, and that's it. You don't have to take any national exams to become a dentist there. But here in the US, you do have to take the national board in order to become licensed. There's other requirements besides the national boards, but this is the thing that everybody needs in order to get licensed in any states. Some other states may have other extra requirements, but this is for everybody. And the Inbde, what it does, it helps jurisdictional boards evaluate the qualifications of individuals seeking licensure in dentistry. The exam assesses essential knowledge, skills, and problem-solving abilities necessary for safe practice, aiding in the protection of public health. All U.S. licensing jurisdictions currently recognize the Inbde, covering all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Additionally, details on licensure and specific jurisdictions requirements are available through the American Dental Association and related resources. So I always get this question, what are the requirements to become licensed in the U.S.? The main one is this board exam, and then there's others. So you have to check the specific state where you want to get licensed to see which other requirements they're going to need prior to giving you your license. Remember that this is a test that is taken by dental students when they're in the 4th year of dental school. So here, dental school is 4 years, and most students take this exam when they're finishing their 3rd or starting their 4th year. So it's an exam that is designed to evaluate contents that you study during dental schools. Most dental schools in the US do prepare you to take this exam, so all their content is tailored towards the exam. So they're going to do practice questions and practice exams in their classes. Something that as a foreign dentist, you're not going to do, right? Because your school in a foreign country is not preparing you for the IMBDE. So it might be a little bit more challenging. I think it's a lot more challenging for foreign students to take the exam compared to US dental students. If you talk to any dental student here in the US, they're probably going to tell you that the exam wasn't hard at all because it's something that they covered in the regular dental school curriculum. But sometimes the curriculum can be very different in other countries, and education just varies everywhere in the world. So it's very important that you get yourself prepared, and also that you prepare with somebody that's tailoring this content or the practice towards international dentists, because they're going to have a better approach on how different your education was, and they're going to understand better how you might not necessarily have covered these topics through dental school, or maybe you did cover them, but not as deep as they are covered in the IMBD. Some people are going to tell you that this was easy. It wasn't my case. I thought it was a very challenging exam. I studied for about 6 months. And while I was studying, I was also working. So I wasn't just studying full time, because for me, it's very challenging to have a schedule if I have a lot of free time. Does that make sense? So I work better under pressure. So for me, it was better to kind of like have study schedule while I was doing something else than just having 24/7 available to study, because when that happened, I just didn't really study much. That was me. Maybe for you, that's different. Some people take off work to study for this. Some people are going to tell you I only study for 6 weeks. Some other people study for longer. For me, it was better to do it in a 6-month period while I was working as well, so that I would have like a set schedule on what to study each day. And that way it was easier for me to organize my time. Which is weird because I didn't have much time, but it worked for me. And then the Joint Commission of National Dental Examinations is the agency responsible for developing and administering the test. You will physically take the test at a Prometrics center, and this center has multiple locations within the US and Canada. So if you're planning on coming from a different country to take the IMBD, make sure you have all the visa requirements that you're going to need to enter, whether it's Canada or the US, before, of course, booking your ticket and booking your exam. The Joint Commission is not going to take any responsibility for any immigration problems that you may have when coming into the exam, and that's not an excuse for you to be able to postpone your exam with, and not charge you a fee, or maybe lose your money that you already paid for the exam. We're going to discuss fees in a few minutes. So make sure you have your visa to come into the US or Canada if you're going to take it in Canada, and find a Prometric centric that works best for you. As I said, there's several locations. You can go into their website to find a location that's closer to the area that you want to take the exam. So as any test, it does have a structure. And as a dentist, I've been taking tests my whole life. And I do think that knowing the structure of the test can help you how to navigate the whole process of taking the exam. So let's talk about the test structure so you have a better understanding how the whole test is going to go and what to expect when you're taking it. And for this, I'm going to read some parts. So everything that I'm reading right now, it's from the 2025 candidate guide. So you can find this online. I just made kind of like a summary, and I know sometimes it's easier to hear the information instead of reading through this whole manual. All right, so about the test structure, the total administration time is 12 hours and 30 minutes. So it's a lengthy exam, okay? You're going to have to be sitting there for hours. This includes an optional tutorial, scheduled breaks, and a post-examination survey. So out of the 12 hours and 30 minutes, there's also these other things included besides the test. The test is administered over 2 days. So you're going to have day 1 and day 2, which you're going to schedule at your choice. But the first day is going to be a lot longer than the second day. And you're going to have to physically go to this Prometric Center twice. The second administration day, so the second day of the test, day 2, which I call it, must occur within 7 days of the first day of the administration. All right, so the administration does not need to occur over 2 consecutive days. It used to be like this before COVID. It used to be 2 consecutive days, so it was challenging to find 2 available dates in a row, right? So there were less options, but now you can do 2 different days that are not consecutive, but it has to be within a 7-day period of the first day of administration. And these 2 days, of course, have to happen at the same administration test center. So you can't go to one Prometric one day and then to another city a different day. You have to find the availability on a single Prometric center of your choice. And then what happens if you don't take the test in 2 consecutive days? So let's say you don't show up for day 2, you're going to have to be retested at your own expense. So basically you have to pay again for the same exam and just find another day to go take the test. So make sure you show up for both days, of course, and make sure you plan accordingly so that you're able to make it to the test center on time. There's going to be scheduled breaks throughout your test where you're going to have full access to your belongings. I think this is very important. It's something that I didn't know before hand when I take the test the first time. So the test is structured in a way where you have scheduled breaks. So when a break is going on, you have a certain amount of time to leave the room where you're taking the test because you're taking the test in a computer. So I forgot to mention this. If you're international and you're not familiar with these things, it can be a little bit intimidating and kind of new. It's sort of similar to the TOEFL test where you go to a test center and there's a computer where you sit down and basically there's literally a camera in front of you above your head to make sure you're not cheating. And you have a set amount of time with a timer. You start your test, you take your tutorial test. If you want to do that, the tutorial walks you through how to operate the whole software of the test, which is pretty easy. It's like a Windows 95, so it's going to look very different than what computers look nowadays. But they're going to tell you how to select the answer and how to scroll through the questions, how to go back, and all those things throughout that tutorial, which you are able to take, and you have a set time frame to take that tutorial before you start your actual test. Throughout these scheduled breaks, you're able to leave the building, basically. So you're able to leave the room where the computer is, which is like a computer lab where you're sitting, right? You're able to leave, you're able to go to the bathroom, you're able to eat something, you're able to fully access your belongings, which most of the times are in a locker room. And with your belongings, you can have notes. So you're able to actually access your notes when you have a scheduled break. Of course, there's a set time of breaks, so you can't just hang out outside of the building for however long you want. But you do have enough time to go to the bathroom, check your notes, eat something, and then you're able to come back to the test, to take the test in the computer. Every time you leave the computer and come back after a break, you are again subject to the security check that they do where they check everything. So we're going to talk about everything that they check a little bit further through this 4-episode special that I'm doing about the IMBD. But keep in mind that you need to come back from your break early enough to have time to go through that security check and identity check again. All right, we're talking about the test structure. So let's dive in a little bit more about what kind of questions are they going to be asking. And this is not about which topics they're going to be testing. It's about how's the format of the question. So there's two main question formats, which are the standalone questions and the item sets. So the standalone questions are regular multiple choice questions with 4 alternatives. So very straightforward. What color is the sky? 4 options. Blue. Okay, you select that one, you move on. But then there's item sets. Are a little bit more complex to navigate and are a little bit more complex to answer because there's a lot of information that's going to be provided and you don't have much time, right? So for the item sets, it's normally going to be a clinical case where there's a description. So there's going to be a narrative about the case. Let's say 4-year-old patient presents after trauma that happened 2 days ago, accompanied by mother, yada, yada, yada. So there's going to be a narrative about the case. And then there's going to be a description. And then often you're going to have a few questions about that narrative. There's going to be one narrative, which will be like the clinical case that may have the charts, may have the x-rays, may have a periodontal exam. Or it may not. It may have pictures if it's something related to oral path. You're going to review that narrative, and then there might be 2, 3, 4 questions related to that narrative. The test consists of 500 questions divided into 2 consecutive days. We already talked about not necessarily being 2 consecutive days, but there's a time frame to sit for both days. So day 1 is going to be 8 hours and 15 minutes and 360 questions. So this is going to be the most dense day. Day 1 is the hardest every time, not just related to the type of questions that you're going to be answered, mostly related to how exhausting it is to sit for 8 hours and 15 minutes answering questions and kind of like using your brain constantly for those 8 hours. So it's going to be just very, very exhausting. This is going to be divided in 4 sections. And there's an optional break in between each section. We already talked a little bit about the breaks. And once you finish each of those 4 sections, you can go back to the previous sections. So I mentioned earlier that you can access your notes during the break, but it doesn't mean that you can access your notes and then go back and correct a question that maybe was wrong, right? So these 4 sections that you're going to have on day 1, these 4 sections are going to be, there's going to be 1 break in between each section. which is a scheduled break where you can access your belongings, you can eat, you can go to the bathroom, leave the building, and then you have to come back and kind of like redo that security check. You're able to skip your breaks if you want to. I do not recommend skipping your breaks. You should make sure you're staying hydrated. So you have to go to the bathroom. You have to make sure that you're eating something because nobody works well in an empty stomach. And then you want to make sure you can access your notes if there's anything that you didn't remember and you want to kind of like go check that and then come back. But once you leave for that scheduled break, you cannot come back to the previous section. So you come back and there's no going back to that first section. So that was already submitted. It is what it is. It's done. You move on to the next section. You can also take unscheduled breaks, but when you do that, you are losing time because the time is running. You cannot access your belongings. So if you leave for a non-scheduled break, let's say it's an emergency, you need to really use the restroom, you can leave the room for a few minutes and then come back, but you cannot access your belongings. The full access to your locker is only during scheduled breaks. So we said there's going to be 4 sections in the first day. Sections 1 to 3 will be 300 standalone questions, and the fourth section will be 60 item sets, or aka the clinical cases that I mentioned before. So during day 1, we said that you have 8 hours and 15 minutes to solve those 350 questions. Again, to recap, out of those 360 is going to be Section 1, 100 questions, Section 2, 100 questions, Section 3, 100 questions, all standalone so far, and then Section 4 is going to be the 60 item set questions, which are the ones with the narrative and the clinical cases where there's more questions related to a single clinical case. So it's not going to be 60 clinical cases. It's going to be less than that. And then for day 2, which is going to be the shorter or easier day, less exhausting day, it's going to be 4 hours and 15 minutes, and it's going to be 140 questions divided in 2 sections. So that means that during day 2, you're only going to have 1 scheduled break. On this day, all the questions will be item sets, so the clinical cases again. So there's going to be the narrative and all that. One thing that is very important to keep in mind, and if you check the candidate manual online, the 2025 version, you're going to be able to find, I don't know if you can see it here. There we go. Some information regarding on how everything and how the whole structure of the test is divided. It's going to tell you specifically how many minutes are there in any section. Why is this important? Because you have to do the math on how much time do you have for each question, and you have to practice because you have to be fast. So the standalone questions are the fastest to answer, and you don't have much time to answer each of the questions. So day 1 is going to be a total of 8 hours and 15 minutes. So the first 15 minutes is going to be the tutorial, which is optional. This is the area where they're going to walk you through how to answer all the questions. This is the part that I mentioned before that is like a Windows 95 kind of like tutorial on how to follow everything and how to answer all the questions, how to navigate the whole software. Then we have section 1, which is going to be 100 standalone items, and you have 105 minutes. So basically you have 1 minute per question. This is something that you have to make sure that you keep in mind and that you practice. And there's several apps to practice for this to make sure that you have enough time to answer each of the questions. So everything should be question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. So you got to move fast. Then you're going to have a 15-minute scheduled break where I do recommend that you take all your scheduled breaks. Make sure you go to the bathroom, you check your notes, and that you also eat something and drink some water. Then we have section 2, again, 100 standalone questions where you have, again, 105 minutes. So it's pretty much a minute per question. You, again, gotta move fast. Scheduled break 2, it's also optional. Then we move on to section 3, 100 more questions, and then a scheduled break of 15 minutes, again, that is optional. That will be your third and last break. And then you will come back for section 4, where there's going to be 60 item cases. So the item questions where you're going to have a narrative. It's not necessarily 60 cases, but it's 60 questions about clinical cases. And you're going to have 105 minutes. So you do have a little bit more time to answer these questions because it's, again, more than a minute per question, or a little bit, almost 2 minutes. But you have to navigate through the whole narrative. So the clinical case, any images or any clinical pictures that they may show. And then sometimes these questions, we're going to talk a little bit more details about this in the future, but sometimes they do have a whole narrative that they make you read about a case. Let's say, for instance, the case that I mentioned before. So a 40-year-old patient comes in after a dental trauma accompanied by their mother and yada, yada, yada. And then you go to the question. The question is, what material would you use to restore a molar, for example? So nothing related to the actual case. So you might want to read the questions first before you dive into the whole narrative, because you spend your time reading the whole narrative, and then most likely there might be 1 or 2 questions which might not be related at all to that. So make sure you navigate the test and that you use your time wisely, because the timer doesn't stop. So by the time you hit start your test, it won't stop. So let's say you go to schedule break, and instead of the 15 minutes, you take 25, you're losing 10 minutes off your test because it will start without you. It doesn't matter. All right. And then I know I touched base a little bit about this recently, but I'm going to read this part out of the candidate's manual because it's very important that you keep it in mind. It says taking a break at any time other than scheduled breaks is considered an unscheduled break. During unscheduled break, candidates may not access personal belongings or prohibited items, study, refer to notes or text, use a telephone, eat food, drink beverage, or leave the test center. Locker access during an unscheduled break is strictly prohibited. Violation of this policy may result in penalties that include, but are not limited to, the voiding of your examination results and enforcement of an additional mandatory wait period before retesting. Okay, so we're going to go through the retesting wait periods later, but make sure you follow the rules because they're watching you. I mean, they might seem like chill and nice and friendly when you walk in, but there's cameras everywhere, including right in front of you while you're taking your tests. And if Prometric determines that you didn't follow the rules or you did any prohibited activity, they may report you, of course, to the Joint Commission of National Dental Examinations, voiding your test results. So all that effort, right, for nothing. All right, this was a little bit of a longer section, but moving on to scoring. So very important when you're taking a test to know how you're going to be scored on that test, right? We want to make sure we understand how they're going to evaluate you and how the scoring system is going to work so that you know what to expect. When it comes to scoring, the results are reported as passed or failed. So this is important because they're not going to tell you what your score was. They're just going to tell you whether you passed or failed the exam. The scale scores range from 49 to 99 with a 75 as the minimum passing score. If you passed, you won't know your score. So they're just going to tell you you passed. But if you failed, they will provide a score with a detailed performance feedback provided to candidates who fail. For the IMBD, feedback includes performance. The feedback includes overall performance and results for clinical content and foundational knowledge areas, though passing or failing is determined solely by the overall scale score. So, I know it sounds very confusing, but basically if you don't pass, they're going to tell you what your score was. So, of course, if you didn't pass, your score is going to be under 75, right? So, let's say you got 74. It doesn't mean that you only had one question wrong. It just means that that was your total score. It's not like a one-to-one scale. And then they're also going to tell you which areas were your strongest and which areas were your weakest so that you can focus on those areas and improve for the retesting in the future. And then there's going to be experimental unscored questions that are included for future development but are indistinguishable from scored questions. So out of all the 500 questions that you're going to be answering, some of them are going to be questions that are just there but are not part of your score. And that's just to try new questions and see how people answer those so that they can decide whether or not that's going to be an actual question in the future or not. And then candidates are not penalized for guessing. So this is important because I know, for example, there used to be a test in Chile back in the day when I was there, when I applied to dental school, that you will be penalized for answering wrong questions. So out of X amount of wrong questions, they will discount one of your good answers. So that does not happen here. So if you guess and you mark any answer, it's not gonna, and it's right, great. If you guess right, great. But if you didn't, it's not gonna affect your score at all. So I'm not saying that you should be guessing. Of course you shouldn't. But if you don't know, just you can guess your best, the one that you think might be right, and that's not gonna be a problem. So don't leave any unanswered questions unless you run out of time. But then that's why we're doing this episode today, so you know the information that you gotta know, so you don't run out of time and you're not freaking out trying to scroll through the questions. What else do we have for today? I mentioned that we were gonna talk about the retesting policy. So if you fail, when can you retake the test? Of course, we're aiming for you to pass. We want everybody to pass on their first attempt, but that's not the reality for everybody. So if you want to retest, there's going to be some rules. Okay, of course, whatever you pay for your test, that's gone. They're not going to reimburse you, but you can go ahead and sign up for the test again. So how does this retesting policy work? Candidates who have passed the IMBDE may not retake the examination unless required by a dental board or relevant regulatory agency. So if you already took the IMBDE and you pass, you never have to take it again unless it's requested by any agency. The candidates who have not passed may apply for re-examination. And now this is what we want to know how this works, right? Under the Joint Commission of National Dental Examinations, there's a 5-year, 5-attempt eligibility rule. So candidates must pass the examination within option A, 5 years of their first attempt, or option B, 5 examination attempts, whichever comes first. Subsequent to the 5th year or 5th attempt, candidates may test once every 12 months after their most recent examination attempt. So ideally, you should pass the test within the first 5 years of failing it. So if you, for any reason, you say, oh, I'm going to try this test, I want to see how it goes, I'm going to go test, and then you fail, and then you forgot about it, you kept living your life abroad, and then all of a sudden you want to retest again, you may want to look into this retesting policies. Also, the candidates must wait a minimum of 60 days between each unsuccessful IMBDE attempt, with a maximum of 4 administrations permitted during any 1-year period of this time. And this is not a 1-year calendar year, it's just 12 months. So if you take the test and you fail, you cannot sign up for it until 60 days after you failed. And remember that you don't get your results until a couple of weeks since you took it. So you're not going to know whether or not you have to wait that 60 period of time until you actually get your results. So if you're coming from abroad and you're just staying for a couple of months, depending on how long your visa allows you to stay in the States, you might have to travel back home and then come back to retake the test. And then this policy cannot be appealed. So it is what it is. The IMBDE attempts are independent of any prior NBDE attempts. So this is great news for anybody who failed the National Board of Dental Examinations Part 1, 2. With respect to the 5 years, 5 attempts eligibility rule, it doesn't apply if you failed the National Board Part 1 or 2 5 times. You can just go ahead and test for the integrated option. Candidates who have previously failed 5 times or more on the Part 1 or Part 2 will also have 5 years, 5 attempts on the integrated National Board of Dental Examinations. So if you already failed 5 times Part 1 or Part 2, it's okay. You can still have 5 times to pass the IMBD. Of course, nobody wants to take the test 5 times, but you have to know what the rules are. And when you ask for a report of your IMBDE results, so let's say you're applying to a dental school to do the advanced standing program or for residency, once you request your IMBDE transcripts to be sent out to your dental school that you're applying to or to ADIA Pass so that you can apply, or ADIA Capit, they will also report any failed past attempts. So if you pass, and let's say you took it 5 times and you passed on your 5th attempt, when you send your transcripts to the board, whether it's to get your license or to the school that you're applying to, they will receive all the failed and your score for all the previous times that you attempted to take the exam. So also keep that in mind, because, some schools are not going to take candidates that have tested multiple times for an exam. I don't say this to scare you. I just say this so that you keep that in mind instead of just making the mistake of just taking the exam just to see how it is and not being well prepared. So I hope this helps navigate the process, because I know the IMBD can be very intimidating. It can be very challenging. I know it firsthand how hard it is to study, to wake up in the morning, 5 a.m. before you go to work to study and stay consistent and have support in order to be able to prepare. I know there's a lot of people that have families that are preparing for this exam, or that are, supporting their family while trying to prep for this test. And it can be extremely challenging. My best advice can be to know the test. So hopefully everything that we went through today can help you understand the structure of the test in a way that it will help you navigate and prepare accordingly, but also not be intimidated on the day of the test. Because I know that in our countries, if you're international and you're listening, it can be intimidating to go to a foreign country in a foreign language to take a test. Maybe came in as a tourist to go take your test, and then it can be intimidating if you're not used to being in that sort of environment. It's very kind of like formal and serious, and there's a lot of policies that are very wordy and sometimes hard to understand. So the whole purpose of this episode today was that you were able to understand that, and that I'm able to share this information with you. Although it's available online, sometimes when you hear it from somebody else, it makes more sense. So when you're preparing, if you understand everything better, if you understand how the whole structure, how long it's going to take, how is it going to be the break, what can I bring, what I can't, what can I do, what can't I do, it's going to be easier from somebody telling you than just reading it from the candidate's manual. So for next time, what do we have? We're going to talk a little bit more about other things in the future. We're going to talk about how to sign up for the test. So let's say you're already preparing, but you don't know how to sign up for the test. We're going to talk about that on another episode. We're also going to talk about study tips and sources. I also want to talk about the day of the exam. So what to expect when you show up to that Prometric Center after you did all your studying and all your prepping for the exam and you signed up and everything. So these are different things that I want to cover in different episodes. And hopefully this time I'm going to be able to do everything, because now, I have more resources because I've been podcasting for a while. I know how to edit the content and all that. So when I first started, as I mentioned earlier with YouTube, it was challenging because I wasn't really very good at editing videos. But now I have a lot of a friendlier software that I can use, and that helps edit everything with AI. So much easier for me. I love, communications, and I love talking to you every week. I'm trying to keep up with my episodes. But if you have any inputs, any feedback, if there's anything that you would like to hear about, or anybody that would like to be interviewed here as a guest, I'm happy to hear from you. So my DMs are open. Just reach out to me and we can talk. I try to answer everybody. If I didn't answer, just go ahead and shoot me another DM, because sometimes Instagram filters my DMs and just random messages, they think that it's a spam and they'll filter it. So I'll see you next week, I guess. I hope this episode was helpful. Join my broadcast channel. Follow us on Instagram. Follow me on Spotify if you're listening to this on Spotify. If this is YouTube, make sure you follow my channel too. I'm trying to keep you all posted and give you all the information that I have so you can be better prepared and you can nail the IMBD. So my best wishes for you if you're taking the exam, if you had a pass, if you had a failure, feel free to share that with me. I love to hear all your stories and I love to talk to you. So I'll see you next time. Bye.